Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast, wherever you are in the world. I've got Harriet Bratt coming from overseas, and she is actually going to talk to us about a lot of the audience are thought leaders and public speakers, but she is talking about public speaking on another level, impacting people. Think about TED or TEDx. So I'm really happy to have her on to pick her brain to go to the next level from public speaking to impact, and really happy to have her on. So Harriet, welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. Hey to you and your listeners.
Yeah, we're really excited. And so just briefly share your origin story and we will dive into the conversation.
Sure. And just before I jump into the origin story, I'll just share that, as has been said, I'm Harriet. I'm an international speaker, trainer, and firewalk guide. So I work with thought leaders, mentors, leaders, coaches, as I truly believe it is one thing to speak and another to impact. So how do we step fully into our power and create effective, engaging, but most importantly, impactful presentations? So it's a real pleasure to be here. My origin story to becoming a speaker was actually born out of network marketing. I don't know if you've ever been in network marketing, Christopher, or any of your audience, but I was in a place where I became very unhappy and very desperate in a job. And I was one of those people, as Tony Robbins said, that just burnt the bridges, left the job and jumped into network marketing because I just had a desire to be doing anything but what I was doing then. I'm sure many people can relate to feeling stressed out at work, feeling undervalued, working an insane amount of hours, and really missing out on your life, connecting with your friends and families, enjoying your time, etc., etc. Everyone will say that in different ways. So I had this desperation and I found network marketing. But within network marketing, I found personal development and I found speaking. And I started listening to these incredible speakers and these amazing teachers. And I just became absolutely obsessed. And funny enough, it was listening to Les Brown's story. Do you know Les Brown? Yeah, most people in this world, of course, have heard of him. But if you haven't, he was one of the top motivational, still is, but for a long time was the top motivational speaker. And I was listening to his story. I was just watching a YouTube video, listening to his story about how he had been sat in the audience listening to Zig Ziglar. And one of his friends tapped him on the shoulder and said, Les, you could do this. And he was like, what do you mean? Do what? He was like, you could be a speaker. And Les was like, so it's a thing. You can do that and you can get paid. And listening to it, Harriet of 7 years ago, light bulbs went off. My whole body started fizzing. I call it champagne in the veins. And I just had to find out more. And for me, that's when the journey was born.
Fascinating. Yeah, I grew up listening to Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn, and it's another level when you can impact millions just through it. It's a different level. And so we will dive into the questions. First question that I have for you is when you talk about, because you talk about a lot of public speaking is sharing your origin story, but there's this thing, the hero's journey, where it's like a disability or it could be a setback or some catastrophic that just fuels you. And for you, it was ADHD. So how did that catapult you and put that drive and fuel to help others and impact people?
I think, like many, I didn't realize it was that until I was in it and doing it. But when I was younger, I would say that as a part of having ADHD, I was actually bullied and victimized by my house mistress. And I was continuously told, I always say it was never the ADHD, it was never the condition, it was only ever the approach and how people talked to me, communicated with me about having ADHD and their level of understanding. So suddenly this super enthusiastic girl that was just high on life and buzzing, suddenly overnight when this diagnosis came through, it suddenly got switched to sit down, be quiet, go and take your medication, stop showing off, stop seeking attention. And then when I moved into a boarding school, my house mistress at the time, I just started to share that a moment ago, really bullied and victimized me to the point where after a year, I ended up in solitary confinement. She placed me there for 2 weeks. I was sat at 11 years old in a white box room, no books, no TV. Of course, in that day, no mobile phones or social media or anything like that. And I was left there for 2 weeks because apparently I was wrong and I was too much. And I'm sure there were many other reasons behind that, but that's where I found myself ending up. And I'm sure that many people can relate to this, and maybe they didn't experience being bullied or victimized, but I'm sure many people can relate to feeling lost, alone, self-doubt, constantly questioning myself. And of course, that bred a narrative in my mind. And so even by the age of 30, I was always questioning myself. I was always second guessing. I'd have a conversation and then I'd go and replay it over and over again in my mind. I was scared to speak up. I was scared to share what I really thought in case anyone judged it or commented on it. My sort of Harriet moments, I like to say AD, Harriet D, my little Harriet moments, I was suppressing the entire time. And therefore, I wasn't truly living a happy and fulfilled life, right? If we're not showing up as our authentic self, if we're not living in our core and we're always trying to be something for everybody else, we're never going to find that true happiness. So really, for me, that journey started when I clicked. As I said, I found the personal development world. I went on my own journey of understanding my behavior, understanding the thought patterns I had, understanding how that was influencing both my behavior and my results and the life that I was living. And I said, enough is enough. So I went on my own healing journey. And then, of course, I think like many people, the same thing you're doing with this amazing podcast, shout out to you. I just found, oh my goodness, if people could just have a little piece of this, if people could feel that same way. So I just made it my duty to share with as many people as I possibly could. And then the part of speaker training came in when anyone that knows me knows I am obsessed with events, whether I am there as a student, a participant, a team member, the host, the speaker, whatever it might be. If we're running our own events, I just love being in that environment. Of course, the more I was in that environment, the more speakers I started to see. And I suddenly saw this correlation, and I'm sure you've seen this too. How many times have you been in an event, particularly a multi-speaker event, and there are speakers that light up the room, captivate the audience, and make impact? And then there are speakers that the audience start getting their phones out, tapping away. And even if they're not on their phone, they're distracted in their mind. Oh, I didn't send that email. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? They're not engaged. And I realized it had nothing to do with the content. These people had amazing wisdom, information, beneficial value that they could share with the audiences, but they just weren't delivering it in an engaging way. And it's one thing to have the words come out of your mouth. It's another thing for them to land in the hearts of your audience. So that's where the passion for training speakers was born from as well.
Yeah, and a lot of these it's skill-based. So we'll dive into some of the things that will dissect what is charisma, is what you're describing. And here's one thing is what a huge epiphany that I had is that people assume that people that get up on the stage and share their message and story, they have it all figured out. And what was interesting is I found that the speakers that shared their vulnerabilities or were more authentic than the speakers that put up a front were more effective. And talk about why that makes the speech more powerful and memorable.
I believe it just comes down to our basic human connection. And beautiful question. I think a lot of speakers, when they get on stage, there's almost that moment of, I'm on a stage, I need to be professional, and I need to put my phone voice on and almost become a little bit robotic. And when we speak in that way, there is a disconnect. Imagine having a conversation with someone in the street or your friend over dinner where they suddenly stiffened up, slightly changed their voice, started articulating everything and trying to sound perfect. It's not. We're laughing about it now because it's true. We feel that. And even if we're not consciously aware of it, when we're listening to speakers that do that, we just switch off a little bit. We're not as naturally engaged. And you mentioned about having an origin story. I really believe that every speaker should. And at the same time, I believe that you should have a fresh story or a different relevant story, maybe a few, every time you speak, because that's what keeps it fresh. The origin story is what you become known for. It might be what you become booked for. It gives your audience a sense of familiarity when they hear it and they know you, right? I could tell you Les Brown's story. And when he starts sharing it, I'm not bored of it. I'm saying it along with him. But at the same time, I love it when he then brings in a fresh story, a new story, something that's happened in his life just 1 week ago. His latest challenge. You spoke about the hero's journey earlier. What's his latest challenge? He overcame cancer. So how can we share from where we are right now? And when you're speaking, yes, of course, there's ways to amplify what you would do in your day-to-day life. But actually, the more that you can take to the stage in a conversational, everyday manner, the easier it is for your audience to feel like, oh, it's just another human being and we're connecting. We're open here. We can have this space together. And even if it's not necessarily a back and forth conversation, although I always encourage engagement, even if it's not necessarily a back and forth conversation, it's a back and forth exchange of energy. So even if you're speaking and they're nodding, they're taking notes, they raise their hand, they give a thumbs up, they get up and stretch with you, they do the exercises. It's an interactive experience. So the more we show up as ourself, our authentic self on the day, because that will vary as well, right? We're not always at the best of the best state, but we can show up and learn ways to deliver even if we're not in our best state that day. So show up as you would in your everyday life, but amplify what you do from a stage.
Yeah, I love that, how you're talking about connecting emotionally. And they said that the number one fear people have is getting up on stage and talking. So what mindset do great public speakers have? And I love this idea where you don't have to be perfect. You just go up there and you're sharing and exchanging energy. What mindsets help great public speakers?
I would say, and I have to say this quote now, you started with that little moment, but progression over perfection, right? Progression over perfection. The mindset that the great speakers have is the ability to feel the fear and speak up anyway, right? Every single absolutely outstanding, immensely impactful speaker that you see started from step one. And I can promise you that probably every single one of them felt that immense fear. We feel it at varying levels, but they felt that fear. So the mindset was, I'm going to feel the fear and I'm going to speak anyway. I'm going to take the action. It's going to be a little bit messy at times. I'm going to make mistakes. I will be mortified looking back on my first speech 10 years later, right? But it's all part of the journey. And it's exactly the same with any skill. Let's think about driving, simply because that's very relatable, right? How many of you drive? Yes? Think about when you first started driving, the first time you got in that car, especially the first time you went down the motorway. Like panic, right? Your heart's beating, mirrors, gear stick, right? You're trying to do all of it and it feels overwhelming. But you keep practicing, you keep showing up and taking the lessons, you keep getting in the car and going to drive, learning to drive, improving the skill of driving. And I'm willing to bet that there's many people here now that get somewhere and you arrive and you shut your engine off and you think, oh, I didn't even remember that journey. Like, I've just arrived. Yes, because now it's in your muscle memory. And I do hope you pay attention when you're driving, but you get my point. It's exactly the same with speaking. So the mindset is, and of course, there's tools that can help you with that mindset. But the mindset is, don't fake it. Don't pretend it's not going to be there. Don't try and overcome the fear. Feel the fear, but speak up anyway. Come out of your head and into your heart. When we're in fear, we're up here thinking about ourselves. What could go wrong? What if I make a mistake? What if they ask me a question I don't know the answer for? And with love to every single one of you, that is all about you. You're thinking me. But when you come from your head to your heart, head to heart, and you focus on your audience, how can I help? Why is what I've got to say important? How can I bring value? What is the benefit in this audience listening to me right now? How can I serve them? Now you're in heart, you're in service, you're in contribution. And when we step into that state, it's much easier to feel the fear and step up on that stage anyway, because you're focused on service, not about what could happen for you.
Yeah, I love that. Getting outside of your head. There's the other question, because we're a business entrepreneurship podcast, and how can someone use public speaking to grow their business and increase their income.
Could you repeat that one more time? How can
someone listening to this, how can they use public speaking to grow their business and increase their income?
Brilliant. I'll elaborate, but a very simple answer. If we just think in simplicity, business is a numbers game, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
So when you have the ability to speak from a stage, you have the ability to speak to more numbers. Instead of it always being a one-to-one conversation, now you're one-to-many. And whether you start with small groups, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 20, you could work your way to speaking 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100,000, right? The possibilities are endless. Speakers are rocking stadiums right now. So you've just multiplying your ability to share your impact, your value, what you do with a larger amount of people. And inevitably, because business is a numbers game, you are going to make more impact. And if you're effective, if you're impactful, and if you have a solid, powerful offer that is congruent with your talk and takes them to the next level, then the people who will resonate are much more likely to sign up with you. So therefore, you are going to increase both your impact and your income.
Yeah, I love that. It's all about brand and your visibility. The other follow-up question I have for you is people listening to this, and now we have a podcast and YouTube, and there's live and Zoom and virtual. What are the best ways to engage a virtual audience? And are in-person public speaking events just going to be reserved for the absolute best and the people that are getting started, or that are just they're going to be doing it like remotely?
I believe there's space for everybody to still speak in different environments. Now, of course, if you're looking at earning a big income and if you're looking for big audiences, then more often than not, you're going to need to have an established name, an established brand. You are more likely to be an experienced speaker. Not often. It can happen depending on how you come into speaking. But more often than not, if you're just getting started, it's unlikely that you're going to be on the bigger stages. But it doesn't mean that you can't still speak in person. If you have enough value, if your message, and you need to be clear on the outcome of you speaking, what are your audience walking away with? If you have a good enough and a solid enough message, then event hosts will want you to speak. And no matter what is happening with AI or holographics around the world right now, you can choose to run with that or be afraid of it. That's totally up to you. But it's not going anywhere now, right? I think we've all established that. It is part of our universe, and it is only going to become even more integrated in what we do. But we will never lose the human connection. The AI will never replace the same level of emotional connection, the energetics of being in a room with someone. So I don't think speaking's going anywhere. And then to answer your first question, how do we engage online? Couple of different tips. If you're on Zoom, for example, like just check in with names, saying someone's name, Christopher, Adam, Claire, nice to see you here. Oh, I love your background, right? What happens when you say someone's name?
It's basically, there's I think the Dale Carnegie Win Friends and Influence People. The number one thing that people want to hear is their name, because it makes them feel acknowledged and valued and appreciated and validated.
It does, exactly. They feel seen. But even more than that, just on a really, that's absolutely true. And I love that you've shared that. But even just on its simplicity, what happens when you say someone's name? Harriet, you look up. It's the most common word that you know to capture your attention. Someone says your name, whether it was your mom, your dad when you were younger, your friends, your et cetera, et cetera. When you say someone's name, they're instantly going to pay attention to you in that moment. But I would say also, asking questions, getting them to write in the chat box, getting them to put a reaction. Share a heart if you agree with this. Share a heart if you've ever felt this way before. Obviously, in the chat box, really common one. Give a number from 1 to 10 about how you feel on this. Put in some fire if you're resonating. Please share your experience. Hey, what's been your biggest takeaway from today? Drop in one sentence in the chat now. Drop what your biggest insight has been on this subject, session, masterclass, workshop, etc., today. So there's many different ways that we can engage. I would also say exercises. Don't just constantly speak at your audiences. Bring in exercises, bring in interaction, and make them, as we said earlier on, feel part of your experience. I think a lot of speakers think it's me, it's my content, the camera's on me, I've got the mic, but actually the best speakers, the most impactful speakers are the ones that are always thinking about their audience.
Yeah. Final questions, because we have around 4 minutes remaining. And how do you combine warrior's mindset in public speaking with lead with love?
How do I combine warrior's mindset and lead with love?
Yeah.
For me, and many people will have their own interpretation around warrior. You say warrior, and a lot of people think about fighting. Yes. But a lot of people also connect to the warrior, the strength inside of you, the courage. And if we actually look into the greatest warriors of history, even when they're fighting for love, they're fighting for protection. So it's not the fighting element that I'm trying to implement into everybody, but it's the courage to stand for something. It's the courage to stand for yourself. It's the courage to speak for yourself. And then, of course, the leading with love concept is really like the yin and the yang of the warrior, right? It's being courageous and it's being strong, but it's doing it from a place of love, not force, not agenda driven, not like trying to get your thought across and you need to listen to me. It's more about how can we be courageous to show up as our best self, in our power every time we share, but really doing it from that space of heart. I shared earlier, head is about us, heart is about your audience. So how can we lead for ourselves with love? You are the same constant you are the only constant in every single area of your life. So first of all, leading with love for yourself and unleashing your warrior. Secondly, leading with love for your friends, your families, etc., your communities. And then lastly, leading with love for the audiences, for the world, for humanity. That's my concept behind it.
I love that. And lastly, how can people find out more about you, to learn more from you and connect with you?
Sure. If they want to connect, first of all, if they want to learn more, that's what I encourage, right? I'm passionate about Speakers Rising, then do head over to my website, harrietbratt.com. There is a masterclass there all about the 5 pillars of public speaking. So if you're serious, if you really want to improve your public speaking, whether you're just getting started or you want to scale, go and check out that masterclass, because I know it will give you some golden nuggets to take away. And otherwise, I warmly invite you to come to Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm Harriet Bratt Speaker.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this impactful conversation, and I loved your energy and enthusiasm, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Right back at you. Thank you for the podcast that you're doing, for the work that you do, and for this space that you have with your community. We rise.